In this video, we're going to talk about project management, what it is, why we care about it, and you'll have a brief overview of some of the tools and technologies that are available to help with the project management process. We care about project management for a variety of reasons. We care that a project, which has a defined start and usually a defined end time, we care that that project can be completed as close as possible to on time, on budget, and within the scope of work that was defined for that particular project. A lot of things qualify as projects. The work of a special report being created, or the work of launching a new educational program, for example, those can all be defined as projects. The project management philosophy that supports it is one that's intended to support good communications, organizing resources, coordinating people and different functions, and all of the contributors that go into a successful project outcome. In our context in the DNA class, we have a simple-ish project lifecycle. We can break down this complicated set of projects into similar phases that happen in a fairly predictable sequence. Now, the start and stop times of each different component might vary from project to project, but the general phases flow in a regular pattern. And this is the process that you can take forward with you into a variety of situations after you graduate. The beginning, and I'm not going to go through all of these, but the beginning is an investigation of the problem or a needs assessment phase. And then there are some specific components, which you can see one example of here, called key informant interviews. This graphic is intended to show a very simplified version of what a project flow can look like as a document and as a way of simplifying what is really a long series of detailed steps that have to take place. That vision or that view is called a Gantt chart. It's essentially a cascade of activities that are related by time and sequence. Gantt charts convey a lot of information at a glance, and they can be they are very useful, and they can be somewhat complicated in large scale projects. They don't need to be, however. A Gantt chart is at its most simple, a list of things that are going to happen at certain times and that last for a certain amount of time. So in this example, we can see on the top left section that there is a team formation phase that has a long duration starting in January and moving into March. And that process includes many smaller steps that are all documented on here. Then another example is this needs assessment component. There are many steps in this process, but the overall process is clearly marked by the gray band, and it shows that it lasts from early February through towards the end of March, and so on and so on. A Gantt chart is a really excellent tool to use in a lot of situations. They're incredibly helpful and incredibly useful. You can see they can be relatively simple, as this one doesn't even have the times, dates, or months shown on it, which would make it a true Gantt chart. Right now, it's basically a flow chart. But a Gantt chart would normally show those times, and it can also show relationships among different pieces or different tasks that happen. For example, you have to finish one task prior to starting the next task, and that's a fixed relationship. So what would that look like in our projects? You have to draft your key informant interview questions before you can conduct a key informant. No ifs, ands, or buts. You can't go into a key informant interview without having your questions thought out in advance. That doesn't mean you can't ask new questions, but it means that there is a critical path that exists between creating your questions and then being able to open up the interviews. So how do we document our projects? How do we keep them tracked, and what kind of support can we get for effective project management? You'll probably take away from this video that the tools can help you and they can do lots of great things. And that's true. They only do as much as you ask them to do, however. So there are some excellent tools in the project management software space that are used to build complicated buildings from the ground up and coordinate the work of many contractors. And these are $1 million projects or multi-million-dollar projects with very strict deadlines and relationships between things that have to happen in specific orders. But we don't have to have all those bells and whistles. We can do just fine with most of the project management software that's available online, and we can use it to our great effect. Teamwork is an example of such software. You can see a screenshot here of what a dashboard for project management looks like. This has, at a glance, you can see all the tasks that are open in this project. You can see certain milestones, and a milestone is simply a touch point in the project lifecycle. It's an expectation of something important happening. It's not necessarily a task. It's not necessarily a publishing date, and it's not necessarily a finish line, but it is a pivotal moment in the life cycle of a project. So at a glance, you can see quite a bit of information around a project. The software packages also often provide you with daily updates or can email you with regular information and snapshots, as well as reminders like this sample here. So the daily email that, in this case, this is still out of the teamwork.com system, provides task reminders as well as upcoming deadlines or milestone reminders. So as you move through a project, you can more readily see what's coming. You can get reminded of things that will happen or that you need to be prepared for. And it's a great way to maintain progress on a project. Likewise, inside the project management systems, normally you have some kind of a calendar system, and that lets you schedule things like milestones and to go ahead and put in those fixed dates of things that will happen. So for instance, in the DNA class, we know that we will be ending class on a certain date, and we know with pretty high reliability when the presentations will be scheduled for. So you could go ahead and put in those things as key dates or milestones for your project. Projects are not just milestones, and they're not just the macro level time frame, though. You need to think about the list of things that you're going to do, and you don't have to know them all today. Looking forward through a project like this, especially one that you've never had experience with before, can be challenging and it can be a little intimidating. But by making a list of the tasks that you realize you have to do and maintaining that list, you can really be on top of the project. You can stay organized. You can keep track of the effort that you're going to need to expend. You can manage your other duties to make sure you have space for this. So a task is something that is a component of completing a project, and it can be documented with a great deal of detail, or it can be a relatively short description of some kind of a task. Also, in these project management systems, tasks can have due dates, they can have start dates, they can be intended to last for specific durations. Like I have 4 days to complete this task, but it doesn't matter when I start it or when I finish it, but I have no more than 4 days. So that's an example of a duration-based task. Tasks in these systems, and this is part of the support that you would have for your team, tasks in these systems can be assigned to team members. That means that one project management system can support the entire group of people working on it. You can easily shift from one person to another if there needs to be a change made. And it's a great way of keeping track of who's got what obligations to the team. And it also shows how far along the project is based on the completion. So each person is essentially considered a resource, and there's only a certain amount of time and effort that you can give to these projects. So project management software can serve that function as well. It helps load balance across the team. One of the key things, though, about making it successful is to really fully utilize a project management system like this. If you start a project on a project management system and then you start skipping things like documenting the tasks or by not putting in milestones, then it only helps with it only helps the project to a limited extent. So that's something to consider. When you start work with a project management system, you really need to make a commitment to using it as the backbone for your communication and for actively managing the project. The screen here shows an example of how to add a task. There are different lists available. You can create a list, and within that list, you can have many tasks. So the organizational schema is that you have one project. That project can have many milestones, and it can have many lists, and those lists can have many tasks. So the organizational framework here is quite straightforward. Logically, it's not complicated to say, I have a big thing to do. Let me break it down into smaller sets of things. And then let me break those smaller sets into individual tasks that can get done. But this is a great and easy way to organize yourself, to keep track of all those things. As I said a few minutes ago, a Gantt chart is a really useful tool to sketch out the process that you'll go through. And the great thing about project management software is that the Gantt charts are automatically generated from the tasks and the task lists. So this is an example of something that is produced as a report in the system. It's not something that you have to manually create. All you do is keep track of the tasks that you're working on and what categories or lists they belong to. And then you can see the project at a glance in a Gantt chart. As I said, this is also a great way to keep track of lots of information in a very concise way. I strongly recommend that as you finish your documentation for these projects, that you include a Gantt chart that represents all the phases of work that you went through to get there. Gantt charts are one of the things that are very appreciated in industry, but too rarely used. Not enough people have the skills or experience. It's not as much a skill issue as an experience issue. Not enough people have the experience to reliably make Gantt charts or to use project management software. They have a tendency to default their own project management approach to things like a spreadsheet or to just using email back and forth, or things like task lists, things like Evernote or Remember the Milk. And while they have a place in keeping track of to-dos, they're not a substitute for the full comprehensive package of management, the full package of task management and time management and resource management services that these online providers have. These project management softwares are excellent. This is another example of a Gantt chart. And in this case, the red lines that connect things from the upper part of the page to the lower part of the page, these are dependent relationships. This is what I mentioned earlier about you can show the critical path of things that must happen before something else can begin. So we see that several of these things on the upper portion of the page must be completed before the phases in the bottom part of the page can begin. And that's a great way to know if there's a block in the flow, or what we call a weakness in your critical path. If you've got a break in your critical path, that means that there can be a delay in the project, because if there's a dependent relationship, or something must be finished before something else can start, then it's really critical that the first thing be done first and not be delayed, because then it has a cascade effect for later parts of the project. So in short, this video is intended to give you just a quick introduction to some of the tools that are available in the project management space, and to show by example how you can manage the tasks that you have to do on a long project like these, keeping track of all the different lists of things that have to be done, whether you're talking about the early stuff on the needs assessment, or you're talking about the later stuff on the project program description, or we're talking about interrogating the literature. All of these are basically lists or phases of the project. And by the end of the semester, you'll have a complete project that has had many, many phases to it. So I strongly recommend that you consider signing up for any of these or other project management software programs, and then use it as a team. Commit to it and let it be a place for you to learn about project management in a safe and supportive environment without fear of failure. The approach to project management of not doing anything has as much risk as trying something here for the first time and not maybe optimizing it. So don't be afraid to tackle something new and try learning any of these systems or others. Each one of these four project management systems has a free service available. Yes, they are also offering paid versions, but for the work of this class and for many of your projects, the single free level is quite suitable. So my recommendation is that you do take a look, that you do sign up, and that as a team, you decide to manage your projects with the support of project management software. The software doesn't make a project successful, but it can certainly help reduce the risks, and it can help you stay organized so that your chances of success go up. Now, how do you decide which kind of system to choose? You can put together a rubric like this one to compare different project management systems based on the attributes that matter to you. Down the left side are a set of example criteria, and you could easily compare systems. You can make up a rating scale, like a numerical based scale shown under System A, or you could use letters like the system, like shown under System B, or stars or something else. The point is that you can easily compare systems based on what you think is important, and then make a decision. In this class, all of the systems should be free. Each of the four systems are free, and that's been verified. But the point is for you to take a look at those, decide what kind of system you want to use, and commit your team to using a project management system, even if it's only to experiment for the next many weeks of this term. When you get out into real projects in other organizations, and that's not for an academic credit, you'll find that the ability to go into a project management system, keep track of things, and then produce reports like Gantt charts, and there are other types of reports available, but reports like Gantt charts can really help you stay on top of things and to communicate to people outside of your direct sphere about the layers of work that go into a project.